then after he watched it back, he was like, "No, this doesn't work. Scrap it." He was like, he rejected the idea so completely.
Right.
That's why Lewis had to have short hair, and he even got to the point where he made her eat more. He said, "You got to eat more, put on some weight." He just wanted no romantic connection between the two at all.
Wow, I did not know that, and that's news to me. But you know that by watching this, that distinctly comes across. Like when I watched this, even very young, I never ever got the feeling that there was any kind of love interest between the two. Yeah, I felt there was a friendship there, but that was it. That was the maximum it was ever going to be. I never felt the chemistry between these two characters. So I think they do a very, very good job in putting that, because it's hard, you know, especially in these films. Like you know, you see it for the first time and you think, "Yep, there you go, straight away, love connection." But in this, they do a very, very good job at nowhere in this that being involved. It's more about the friendship. It's kind of about the partnership more than anything else. That takes top priority here. So I like the fact that they get that right. I think it could have been easily done wrong in a lot of ways, but in this opening scene with her, Matt, it's kind of a nice introduction because we get to see how tough she is, and I think they want to put that across as well, that this is not a girly girl here. She's badass, and she will, you know, take you out. She kind of does these kicks and then whacks out this guy that she's just arrested. One thing I did pick up on very early on, Matt, is that they're all wearing these helmets. I mean, they look like they are going through hell out there. This is not a regular police deal here. They are on the streets wearing these kind of crazy, almost like motorcycle helmets, because, you know, obviously they're getting whacked left, right and centre. But it's interesting because at this point, yeah, we might not have seen so many of these type of riot type police, but nowadays, of course, this is a regular kind of thing. And from what we see in nowadays, in real police, if that sort of thing happens, that's exactly what they look like. That's exactly what they're dressed like. So they've done a very good job there of putting that across. And of course, that is something that, you know, inevitably has happened, Matt. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting as we get further into this, like as we get to when Robocop is created, all this technology that then was not very common. Just how spot on they do get with this. Yeah,
and they do a very good job. So we get the whole introduction of Murphy, who meets Lewis, and you know, there's that famous line, of course, "Glad to know you, Murphy," and you know, he replies pretty neat, so he's impressed automatically. You know, the one thing I picked up very, very early on with Peter Weller was his eyes. Like, his eyes are, I don't know if you noticed it, but they are like, they're like diamonds. And it's kind of interesting that they do not use his eyes at all in you know, once he's in that costume. That's not a part of him at all. But his eyes, he was cast a lot because he was known for those eyes. And, you know, you get to see that very early. He's got those bright blue eyes, and he's kind of coming across as your sort of like, you know, hero type cop. You know, you kind of want to. He's the sort of easily go-to likable guy at this point, and I think he kind of comes across well because it's easy to sort of think this guy's a bit of a wise guy, and you know, you might not like him, but yeah, those eyes, man, I did not realise until I watched this the most recently and I read about it, and then I started to look at his eyes more, and I was like, wow, those eyes are like glass. I mean, he definitely does have those eyes, so I could see why he was cast back then with that. But it's interesting that they do not use the eyes at all in that costume. I don't know if that was ever a thought process of when they were designing it, but there was no real mention of doing that. One thing I'll say, Matt, that I picked up on is when that car leaves and he goes up with Murphy the first time. I love the way how the car just goes up that ramp and there's just sparks flying off of it as they go up. You know, it's like no remorse there. It's just get out there and get the job done. So I like that as an opening scene, Matt. Do you like that as far as an introduction goes for Murphy and Lewis, and of course, you know, Captain Reed, I guess, at this point?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, it really establishes those characters just perfectly. And like you said about like when he get in the car and the sparks fly, even that, like a little glimpse into a sliver of personality there. You're really getting to know those people, and like even if he's got that one quirk in his driving that he's not actually 100% down with, it's not like he's a perfect kind of officer because he's already making small mistakes like that. But it's just a quirk in the personality.
Yeah, I love the way he kind of, he says like, "No, I'm driving." At this point, I love the way he does that, and he sneaks in there and gets that straight away for this. Matt, just to end on talking about Peter Weller as the cast of this, of course, we'll go more into when he's actually in the full suit. But as far as a cast goes, Matt, there were other names mentioned, but Peter Weller for you, is he fit up as, will he always go down as, the ideal candidate for just Murphy at this point? Because I feel like they do a good casting job with this guy.
Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah, I think, like you said, he's got that kind of polished look, and he's got that kind. You just need to look at the guy. If you saw him in a lineup of cops, you'd be like, well, he looks like a standout guy. So yeah, I think he's got that clean kind of image, and he looks like you just need to see him in such. If you was to see him in any other movie, you would pin him as the star of it, because he's just got that rugged, like, handsome, good looks.
Yeah, he definitely has, and that kind of comes across very, very early on in this film, that this is a guy who, you want to kind of go for, and that's, he's kind of, I think he's very, very casted well. And of course, the thing is with this film is there's like a double part to this. You've got to be that, but then, you've got to go through hell wearing that costume. But we'll get more into that as we go along. Now, Matt, we get our first glimpse of course, the corporate OCP. And, I know through listening on the documentaries and stuff like that, they were, shall we say, very much into the whole yuppie kind of era in this. They were trying to go for that yuppie kind of business traders at the time, of Wall Street. That he kind of looked at that as a go-to as far as setting these early spots up. And, I think it kind of, there's an air of element of humour to this. I think they do a really good job at putting this on. But of course, we get to see, for the first bits, we get to see Bob Morton, who's who's played very much here. He's going to be the guy, Matt, with Johnston, who's always kind of there in the background. He's kind of the quiet guy, but he's the sidekick to Bob Morton at this point. He, of course, he's around in a couple of these films as well, but we get to see him, and the poor sucker, of course. What's his name? That guy that gets shot to pieces. Coming up in a second, but
he's definitely got a colourful ending.
Yeah, that's for sure. But I like the way this kind of comes on. I like the way they shoot this in the building. I think it's very, very well done. Again, it's all about introducing us, and what's very only sort of when we're reviewing it, Matt, and watching it a few times after. What I noticed about this is that they spend a hell of a lot of time around Robocop and around Murphy, setting everything up in place. As like it would have been easy to do a whole film just focused on Robocop. But what I think Robocop, this whole film goes down well as doing, is just by giving everybody enough time here. And I think you don't overplay Robocop, because it could have been easy to do that. But I feel like the time everybody gets on screen is done exactly right. I feel like they spend the right amount of time with Robocop, with Murphy, without overdoing it. Because it could have been easy, Matt, to just do it all on, Murphy and the Robocop story without kind of going too deep into this whole corporate world and the whole satire around him. How important do you think that is, Matt, for the success of this film? And because I feel this is why it's so long-standing, this film, is that it's all the other things going on around Murphy and Robocop.
Yeah, can't really talk about that enough. Like just how important it is to set the scene in this film. Just what kind of state Detroit is in, and just how brutal the crime on the streets is. Mm-hmm. And like I said, we always spoke about like full riot gears needing to go out and try and like combat this crime, and the need for things like in this scene that we're getting to in a moment, like just the hardware that they need now is more than just beat cops on the street. And yeah, I think it's very important. It's like with Robocop, it's a real journey. You need to see the human side of him and just like what he has to lose by becoming Robocop.
So yeah, going back into what we get at this point, they're talking about Delta City, and you know they're going off to this meeting basically, and then I love the way they just talk about Jones, and he's got his 209 series, and at this point we're thinking 209, what the hell is he talking about? But there's a great scene here. I love the shot of the whole lift going up. I think that's really well done. Just like you can see the height of it, the way that shot on the camera is really well done. I love that scene, and they use that quite a few often times in this film. But yeah, we get to see Bob Morton, Johnston, and the three of them are going into this meeting that we kind of know there's going to be some sort of presentation going on. But we get that very early on, and of course then we're introduced, Matt, to, of course, he goes down as the old man in this film, doesn't he? He's kind of the guy that's he sits at the end of the table. He's the decision maker. He's kind of like, my perception of him at this point in these films, I always thought he was like a lovable old man. I thought this guy was like, you sort of want to be granddad. He's fine, he's harmless at this stage. Of course, he's got the ruthless Dick Jones, who's his senior vice president, sort of in his ear all the time, and they're talking about the coming up with the new stuff and trying to help the streets and what's going to be good for it. But this scene's really well done. They get to this table. I love all the I know the screens in the background. It's a little bit 80s. It's like, well, they would have thought that was happening, but I feel like they do a good job here setting this up and what it's going to be all about. And of course, we get like the old man's dream, and I think they put out like that whole they put out that whole like sort of mini set of the towers and all the rest of it, like what he wants it to be and look like. And then of course he says, the line, "Old Detroit has a cancer," and the cancer is a crime and it must be cut out. And it's this kind of ruthless kind of thing that's going to go down, and how we deal with that. And it's all about here at this point, what can be done and how can this corporation deal with it. And of course, we finally get to see, Matt, Dick Jones, who's going to be quite big in this film. We'll talk about him as the film goes on a little bit more, but of course, he gets to kind of do this presentation. Matt, how did you enjoy this scene? Because this is when you see this Ed 209 thing for the first time, like especially when you see it for the first time, you're like, whoa, this is kind of like different to what I was thinking a machine would be like. A lot of people would describe the Ed 209 as a giant microphone that we're kind of maybe talking into now. But Matt, what did you? I mean, that design briefly. It's an iconic kind of thing now, and to buy these toys are super expensive. I'm going to say that much. But your take on Ed 209 and the look of it and how they did this, because it took a lot of messing about with the miniatures, and so clever how they've done it by having the miniature as the kind of with them. They do it like with a screen in the background that is kind of mini, and then they put the machine in front of it. But it takes so long to do it, like it's stop motion and all the rest of it. But they do actually make a prop of this, but it cannot move, of course, which is really good and makes a lot of difference. But your take of Ed 209, Matt, and the look, the design of what we get here.
Yeah, I think it's really believable even to this day. It's essentially cutting out all the non-essential bits. Like, it doesn't have a head, it just has sensors or whatever, two massive machine guns, bulky legs. Of course, it's got its flaws. Dick Jones will admit that.
Yeah.
But, they're working on them. But I am a fan of stop motion, and at this time, although it was a bit clunky and juttery, at least everything that you saw on screen was real. It was a real
I like
object, and it existed. A lot of times today, when you get CGI, you can just blatantly tell it's CGI.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do wish that we could go back to the old kind of way of doing things, where everything is an actual existing item in this world.
Yeah, I love the way they bring it in, and you get Johnston, who's like completely scared. He's all over Bob Morton. Bob Morton's like, "No, wait, come on, get off me." He's not taking any notice of this. He doesn't really obviously believe in what's going to happen here. But of course, then they get to this whole, they want to do a little experiment of how successful this thing will be. And this scene, like, I've watched both versions. I've watched the director's cut and of course the theatrical